In the 5th century BC, the great king of Persia ruled the greatest empire the world has ever seen. It stretched from present-day Pakistan to Macedonia and contained a fifth of the world's population. The Persian Empire was complex, rich and all-conquering, and in 480 BC King Xerxes led his mighty forces against Greece, a patchwork of tiny city-states that lay on the western outskirts of his vast kingdom. He decided to punish the Greeks for daring to interfere in his affairs, but in search of vengeance, conquest and glory, he will only find disaster and death. In Straits of Salamis, Herodotus from Halicarnassus collected and wrote down this information so that great and wonderful the deeds of the Greeks and barbarians did not go unnoticed. Subsequent events are known mainly from the writings of Herodotus of Halicarnassus, ancient Greek colony located in the present territory, western coast of Turkey. About 30 years after the Persian invasion, Herodotus began his historioing, his studies regarding its origin and course. Like most people in the ancient world, he believed in omens, predictions, and divine intervention. But he also believed that people can determine their own destiny. So he traveled through Greece and the Persian Empire, read records and inscriptions, talked with local residents, and weighed the evidence according to his own considerations. The Roman writer Cicero would later refer to Herodotus as the father of history. War is father of all and king of all. He renders some gods, others men. He makes some slaves, others free. The root of the conflict between Greece and Persia is a thing of the past. In the 6th century BC, King Cyrus the Great subjugated the Greek colonies in western Anatolia Persian rule. But in 499 they rebelled and turned to their fellow Greeks for help. Only Athens and Eretria answered the call. Together, the Greeks burned the capital of the province of Sardis and the temple of the goddess of the earth, Cybele. It seemed like a big win, but the Persians responded with impressive speed, and the Greeks soon retreated completely to the coast. It took the Persians 4 years to finally crush the uprising in western Anatolia. Then the great king, Darius, turned his attention to the Greeks across the sea, who dared help the rebels. He sent ambassadors to many of the city-states of Greece demanding land and water as a token. Submission. Many obeyed, but two did not. Athens, a young democracy fiercely defending its freedom, and Sparta, a conservative, militarized state that did not obey orders from anyone. Both cities responded to the great king by throwing his envoys into the well, where, as they said, they could find all the land and water they needed. In 490 BC, Darius sent a powerful campaign to subdue the Greeks. Naxos was the largest of several conquered islands. Eretria was plundered and burned. The Persians then landed at Marathon to inflict the same punishment on Athens. Athenian troops, along with those of their small neighbor Plataea, met them on the shore. Although the Greek soldiers were outnumbered 2-1, they attacked. Their hoplite infantry fought with large heavy shields and spears in a dense formation of phalanxes. The more frivolous Persians could not resist their onslaught. Persian troops were killed on the shore. The survivors returned to their ships. Athens was saved. Four years later, Darius died and was succeeded by his son Xerxes. Now he's taken on the task to punish the Greeks and avenge the humiliation of his father. The new King of Kings summoned troops and ships from all over his empire and ordered build a boat bridge across the Hellespont. In the spring of 480 BC, his gigantic invasion force crossed from Asia into Europe. Herodotus estimated its size at 2.3 million people, an incredible number that cannot be. There was no food or drink. Modern historians believe that the probability is 200,000 more, still a huge figure for our era. He was accompanied by a huge fleet, consisting of 1,000 or more warships, supplied vassal states of Persia across the eastern Mediterranean. Greece proved to be an easy target. Many of its independent city-states were notorious for constant strife. But in the face of the Persian threat, 31 states put aside their differences and convened a council of war on the Isthmus of Corinth to plan the defense of Greece. Later, these states were marked on a giant snake column at Delphi, the most sacred place of the Greeks. At the top of the list are the Lacedaemonians, another name for the Spartans, followed by Athenians and Corinthians. Knowing that the Persians would invade from the north, the Greeks sent 10,000 men to hold mountain pass at Tempe, near Mount Olympus. But when the troops arrived, they found that position can be easily bypassed. They were also not sure of the allegiance of Thessaly to Rhea, so the troops withdrew. Instead, the Greeks would stand at Thermopylae with 7,000 men led by Spartan king Leonidas. The Greek fleet arrived at Artemisium to guard the sea flank. Like the alliance itself, the Greek fleet was an uneasy coalition with ships from city-states, such as Athens and Aegina, which until recently were at war. The Athenian contingent was by far the largest. It existed only thanks to the discovery 3 years earlier of rich silver mines in Laurium. It took the foresight of Themistocles, the Athenian statesman and general, to convince the Athenian people did not spend this windfall of distributing cash for themselves. Instead, he urged them to spend money on a fleet of 200 triremes for their own security in the future. This decision could ultimately save Greece. However, Athens aroused such distrust on the part of other Greeks that they refused to serve under Athenian admiral. Thus, Themistocles tactfully accepted the appointment of the Spartan Eurybiades to lead the fleet, although the Spartans had no experience of warfare at sea. Both the Greek and Persian navies relied on the same type of warship, the one that dominated the naval war in the Mediterranean: trireme. Smooth, maneuverable and thin, the trireme carried masts and sails for sailing, but in battle they were lowered, and the ship relied on 3 rows of rowers, who gave the trireme its name. In total, there were 170 rowers on the ship, who could reach a maximum speed of about 10 knots to slam his primary weapon, a bronze battering ram, into the hull of an enemy ship, leaving him crippled. Another tactic was boarding the enemy. There were usually 14 marines on a Greek ship, 10 hoplites armed with spear and shield, and 4 archers. The commander of the ship, a trireme, was sitting at the stern, next to the helmsman. The cybernets that steered the ship's course with 2 rudders. The boatswain and bow officer passed orders to the rowers, and the piper helped them keep time. The carpenter and 10 sailors brought the total number of the ship to 200 people. Each ship had a name, and a painted eye on the nose to prevent misfortune. Herodotus describes the Greek ships as being stronger than the Persian ones, although in what sense we are not sure. He also informs us that there were many more marines on the Persian ships, in total 44. While Leonidas and the Greeks held the pass at Thermopylae, the Persian fleet sailed south along the rugged Magnesian coast. But one night, while they were at anchor, they were hit by a violent storm. Hundreds of ships were wrecked and damaged. Thousands of sailors drowned. According to Herodotus, the Persians further weakened their forces by sending 200 triremes around the island of Euboea. to cut off the retreat of the Greeks, but the whole squadron was destroyed by another storm. Herodotus offers little supporting evidence for this operation, which would have been extremely reckless, and some historians doubt it ever happened. Despite Persian losses, the Greeks still faced a nearly 3-1 chance at Artemisia, and they weren't just in the minority. The Persian navy was more experienced in naval warfare, especially the elite squadron from Phoenicia in present-day Lebanon. However, during 3 days of intense naval battles, the Greek fleet held its own and kept the Persians at bay. But at the end of the third day, terrible news came. Leonidas and the Greeks in Thermopylae were surrounded, the Spartan king, and half of his people were killed. The passage has fallen. It seemed that the efforts of the Greek fleet were in vain. Central Greece and Athens itself was now open to the Persian onslaught. When the Greek fleet retreated, the Persians moved south, burning cities, farms and sanctuaries, although they spared Thebes, one of several Greek city-states that sided with Persia. To the horror of the Athenians, the Greek army, led by troops from the Peloponnese, gathered on the Isthmus of Corinth and began building a large wall to protect their homes from invaders. Athens had to be abandoned. The Greek fleet began evacuating civilians to Troezen, Aegina and Salamis. A few months before the Persian invasion, the Athenians sent a delegation to the shrine of the Greeks, the Oracle of Delphi, in search of guidance for the coming war. They received only a terrifying warning: "Why are you sitting there, fools? Run to the ends of the earth." But the second oracle gave the Athenians some hope. Athens could trust his wooden wall. Some Athenians thought that the oracle referred to the thorny hedge that once surrounded Acropolis of the city, its citadel. So they settled down there, but when the Persians arrived, they were surrounded and slaughtered. Xerxes then burned Athens and their temples to avenge the destruction of Sardis 18 years ago. Themistocles claimed that the wooden wall of Athens was her new fleet, but when the Greek naval commanders met at Salamis in mid-September, the situation looked grim. The king of Sparta was dead. Athens was on fire. The Greek Union was on the verge of collapse. Themistocles desperately tried to stop the retreat of the Peloponnesian ships to the isthmus. He warned them that more enemy and faster ships meant the Greeks will be defeated if they fight on the high seas. But in the narrow strait of Salamis, with less room to maneuver, the Persians would have been able to use their greater numbers, and the heavier Greek ships had an advantage. Themistocles even warned the other Greeks that if they retreated now, the Athenian ships leave the Union and sail to Italy. So, the commander of the fleet, Eurybiades, accepted Themistocles' plan. But Themistocles feared that the Peloponnesians would change their minds. Secretly, he ordered his trusted servant to go to the Persian camp, to tell Xerxes that the Greeks in horror and with the first rays of the sun would flee. Just 8 miles from Phaleron, the great king turned to his generals and admirals for advice. Everyone advised him to immediately attack the Greeks in order to win a final victory that would put an end to war, all except Queen Artemisia of Halicarnassus, commanding 5 ships from Caria. Why risk a battle, she argued, when the great king only needed to threaten southern Greece from land or sea? And the Peloponnesians rushed home to defend their land, and the Greek Union broke up. Then victory was assured. But Xerxes was looking for the glory of battle, and was sure of an easy victory. Then the messenger of Themistocles arrived, and told the king exactly what he wanted to hear, that the Greeks were frightened, and prepared to flee, he must strike immediately. Xerxes ordered the Persian fleet to put to sea that night, so they would be able to destroy the Greeks when they tried to flee at dawn. Meanwhile, an Athenian named Aristides arrived at the Greek camp with sacred relics from Aegina. To inspire the fleet, he also brought news that the enemy had put to sea and blocked straits. Themistocles' ploy worked. Retreat was no longer an option. The Greeks will have to fight at Salamis. The Persian fleet went to sea at night, about 600 triremes, which is 3 to 2 times more than the Greeks. Expecting fierce fighting at the entrance to the strait, they landed 400 soldiers on the tiny island of Sitalia. Their role was to finish off all the shipwrecked Greeks, who made it to shore. Then, keeping close to the mainland, the Persian fleet silently moved into the narrow strait. In front were the elite Phoenicians. The Persians also sent an Egyptian squadron around Salamis to cut off any Greek route to the Gulf of Megara. At dawn, Xerxes arrived at an observation post overlooking the strait. The great king was confident that his presence would inspire his captains to fight more determination, as they had shown at Artemisium a few weeks earlier. The Persian fleet lined up north side of the strait, ready to hunt down the Greek ships when they ran away. Instead, they saw 368 Greek triremes emerging from the Gulf of Salamis, ready for battle. They formed a battle line with the best squadrons on each flank. On the left, the Athenians. On the right, Aegeans. When they were rowing, they sang hymns, Greek battle hymns. At first, they kept in formation, perhaps waiting for the morning breeze to blow at their back, all while more Persians rushed into the channel. The Greek ship then saw the breach and attacked. Both fleets were soon fully occupied. The battle became a chaotic mass of ships circling, trudging in search of an opportunity to ram the enemy and avoid the same fate. In the narrow strait, the Persian squadrons became more and more disorderly. Any ship attempting to retreat runs into other ships attempting to move forward. Their captains sought to impress the great king. Moreover, the Persian oarsmen rowed all night and soon got tired. The Greeks were fresh and fighting for their freedom. The Phoenician squadrons suffered heavy losses. From heavy Greek triremes, several Phoenician captains were brought to Xerxes, who left their ships and reached the shore. They blamed the unfolding catastrophe on the cowardice of their allies, the Carians and Ionians. Just at that moment, Xerxes saw how the Ionian ship rammed the Athenian trireme, and then he, in turn, rammed the Aeginetan ship. The undaunted Ionian marines counterattacked, boarding the Aeginetan ship. Seeing this evidence of Ionian courage, Xerxes ordered take away the Phoenician captains and execute them. Broken ships, floundering men and corpses littered the strait as the battle turned decisively against the Persians. When the Persian ships tried to flee, they were hit on the flank by the Aeginetans, who, on that day, were different from all other Greeks. Queen Artemisia was among those who tried to escape the massacre, with the Athenian trireme in hot pursuit. Seeing that her path was blocked by a friendly ship, she ordered to ram it. When the Athenian captain saw this, he thought that he must be chasing an allied ship and set off to look for other prey. The remnants of the Persian fleet rushed back to Phaleron. In the final and ruthless act of the battle, Aristides landed with a detachment of hoplites on Citylea and killed 400 Persians, who were abandoned there. In total, the Persians lost about 200 ships and 12,000 people, including the commander of the fleet, Arabin, half-brother of the great king himself. The Greeks lost only 40 ships. It proved to be one of the greatest naval victories in history. The Greeks inflicted a humiliating defeat on Xerxes and put an end to all hopes for an easy conquest. Now the king heeded the advice of Queen Artemisia and ordered his general Mardonius to continue camping in the spring, and he returned to Asia with the bulk of his army. Artemisia told him that if Mardonius won, the glory would belong to Xerxes. If Mardonius was defeated, Mardonius was to blame. But Mardonius had no victory. The next summer, he faced the combined Greek army at Plataea. In the crushing defeat of the Persians, Mardonius was killed along with most of his army. On the same day, according to Herodotus, the Greek fleet inflicted another heavy defeat on the Persians at Mycale. The threat of a Persian invasion was over. In subsequent years, a Greek counterattack was led by a new Greek alliance, the Delian League. Salamis battle is credited with greater significance than any other battle in history, a victory that saved Greece from slavery and paved the way for a classical era. This was a period when art, democracy, science, and philosophy flourished in the Greek world. Thus, Battle Salamis was hailed as the battle that saved the cradle of Western civilization. This is a dramatic argument that can be overstated. The defeat of the Greeks would not necessarily lead to the extinction of Greek culture. Nevertheless, the battle near Salamis remains a decisive battle and the turning point in history, and thanks to Herodotus preserved the battle as one of the oldest examples of the heroic struggle with difficulties and the struggle for freedom. Thank you for watching the video. Put like if you liked the video and subscribe to the channel.